The cabin lights of Flight 447 cast a warm, artificial glow across rows of seats stretching toward the distant cockpit. Sarah Martinez moved through the narrow aisle with practiced grace, her navy blue uniform crisp and professional, her smile perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem genuine, distant enough to discourage conversation. In her right hand, she balanced a tray of coffee cups. In her left, she carried the weight of a secret that would have shocked every passenger aboard. "Coffee or tea?" she asked the elderly woman in 8B, her voice pleasant and forgettable. "Coffee, please, dear, 2 sugars." Sarah's hands moved automatically, preparing the drink exactly as requested. 10 years of serving beverages at 35,000 feet had made these motions second nature. But while her hands worked, her eyes never stopped moving. Exit rows 12 and 26. Able-bodied passengers nearby, check. Fire extinguisher location, forward galley port side. Emergency equipment accounted for. Passenger count, 287 souls including crew. Old habits died hard, especially habits drilled into you during 12 years of military service. She glanced at her reflection in the galley mirror as she returned the coffee pot to its slot. 38 years old, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, minimal makeup. Nobody looked twice at flight attendants. They were part of the scenery, like oxygen masks and safety cards, invisible servants of the sky. Perfect. The plane had left Los Angeles 43 minutes ago, bound for Tokyo Narita with a flight time of 11 hours and 20 minutes. Routine. Boring. Exactly the kind of life Sarah had chosen when she'd hung up her flight suit and walked away from everything she'd known. No more classified missions. No more adrenaline-soaked dogfights over hostile territory. No more watching friends die in flames. Just coffee, smiles, and the gentle hum of engines. The head attendant, Marcus, appeared beside her. "Sarah, can you take the business class cabin? Jennifer's dealing with a sick passenger in economy." "Of course." She moved forward, her body swaying naturally with the gentle turbulence. Through the small windows, afternoon sunlight painted the clouds below in shades of gold and white. Beautiful, peaceful, everything she'd craved after the darkness of war. But then she saw him. Seat 12C, middle-aged man, olive complexion, dark hair, business casual attire, but wrong. The jacket was too heavy for the cabin temperature. His white shirt showed dark patches of sweat beneath the arms despite the cool, recycled air. His right hand kept moving toward his jacket's inner pocket, then stopping, then moving again. A nervous tic or something worse. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her face remained neutral. She continued down the aisle, serving drinks, collecting trash, maintaining her cover. But her peripheral vision never left 12C. She'd seen that body language before. In Baghdad, in Kandahar, in a dozen other places where death wore civilian clothing. The man checked his watch, 2:47 p.m. Then his eyes moved, scanning the cabin in a pattern Sarah recognized instantly, tactical assessment. He was counting passengers, identifying threats, locating exits. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His gaze was cold, empty, a shark's eyes. Sarah's military training screamed at her, threat, danger, act. But she couldn't, not yet, not without proof. You couldn't tackle passengers because they looked nervous. She'd seen too many innocent people profiled, harassed, humiliated. She needed to be certain. She retreated to the forward galley, her mind racing through possibilities. Terrorist, air marshal working undercover, anxious flyer having a panic attack. She pulled out her phone, flight mode, but she could still access the passenger manifest she'd photographed earlier. A habit from her old life. Know who's on your aircraft. Seat 12C, Hamid Nazari, Pakistani passport, one-way ticket purchased 3 days ago, cash payment. Her stomach knotted. Through the galley curtain she watched him. His lips moved, silent prayer or final words. His hand finally committed, sliding inside his jacket. She saw the outline of something hard, angular, metal. 2:48 p.m. Then she noticed the others. Seat 17F, young man, also sweating, also checking his watch. Seat 23A, older man, reading a newspaper upside down, his eyes watching the cabin over the pages. Seat 31C, woman in a hijab, her hands gripping her armrests with white-knuckled intensity, fear in her eyes. No, not fear. Determination. 4 of them, coordinated, positioned throughout the cabin for maximum control. Sarah's breath caught. This was real, this was happening, and she was the only one who'd noticed. She could alert the cockpit, but reinforced doors meant limited response. She could trigger an emergency code, but help was hours away over the Pacific Ocean. Air marshals. Maybe one aboard, maybe not. Even if there was, 1 gun against 4 was poor odds. The plane's intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Flight attendants, you're free to begin main cabin service." The man in 12C stood up. So did the others, simultaneously. Muscle memory took over. Sarah's hand moved to the crash axe mounted inside the galley cabinet, hidden behind the coffee supplies. Her fingers wrapped around the handle. Cold, solid, familiar. For 10 years, she'd served coffee and smiled at strangers. She'd buried her past beneath layers of normalcy, convinced herself that quiet life was enough, that she could forget the sound of missiles launching, the G-forces of combat maneuvers, the weight of classified orders that sent her into enemy airspace. But some things you never forget, some skills never fade. The man in 12C reached into his jacket and pulled out a black semi-automatic pistol. Sarah Martinez, former captain of the United States Air Force, 127 combat missions, recipient of 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses and a classified commendation from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, watched the weapon rise, and knew her quiet life was over. "Nobody move," the hijacker screamed. Chaos erupted, passengers shrieked, children cried, overhead compartments rattled as people ducked, trying to shield themselves with seat cushions and carry-on bags. But Sarah didn't scream, she didn't duck. She calculated. Time seemed to fracture into slow-motion fragments. Sarah watched the pistol in 12C's hand swing across the cabin, his finger resting on the trigger with the casual familiarity of someone who'd killed before. The other 3 hijackers moved in perfect synchronization, weapons appearing from jackets and bags, each taking a strategic position that gave them overlapping fields of fire. Professional, military-trained. This wasn't amateur hour. "I said nobody move." The lead hijacker's voice carried a thick accent, his eyes wild with adrenaline and something else, fanaticism, the kind of conviction that made men willing to die. "Everyone stay in your seats, hands where I can see them." Passengers obeyed instantly, some raising trembling hands, others gripping armrests so hard their knuckles turned white. A baby's wail cut through the shocked silence, then another, then a chorus of crying children and sobbing adults. The sound of pure terror. Marcus, the head flight attendant, stood frozen in the aisle, his face drained of color. Jennifer, the junior attendant who'd been helping the sick passenger, slowly backed toward the rear galley, her hands raised. "Smart girl, get to the phone, call the cockpit." But 17F, the younger hijacker, saw her movement. "Stop, back here now, move and I shoot." His weapon tracked her with steady hands. Jennifer's face crumbled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stumbled forward, joining Marcus. Sarah remained in the forward galley, partially hidden behind the curtain. Her mind raced through tactical assessments with the speed of her old fighter jet's onboard computer. 4 hostiles, unknown number of weapons, probably additional explosives. They wouldn't rely solely on firearms. Cockpit door reinforced post 911, which meant they'd need to force compliance through threats against passengers. Standard hijacking protocol. The lead hijacker, she mentally designated him Alpha, strode toward the cockpit with purposeful steps. He pounded on the reinforced door with his gun's handle. "Pilots, open this door. Open now or I start EXECUTINGPASSNGRS. Inside the cockpit, Sarah knew the pilots would be following emergency procedures. Transponder squawking 7500 hijack code. Emergency radio transmission to air traffic control. Door locked, barricaded. They'd never open it, not for threats. Alpha knew this too. He'd counted on it. He grabbed an elderly man from seat 3A, dragging him into the aisle. The man's 70s, gray hair, wearing a cardigan, struggled weakly. Please, please, I have grandchildren. Then they'll remember you as a martyr. Alpha pressed the gun to the man's temple. Sarah's hand tightened on the crash axe hidden behind her back. Not yet. Too far away. 4 against 1. She needed better positioning, better odds. But watching an innocent man about to die ignited something in her chest. The same rage that had made her volunteer for the most dangerous missions. The same fury that had earned her a reputation as the most aggressive pilot in her squadron. Wait, she heard herself call out, stepping from behind the curtain. Her voice trembled intentionally. Wait, please, I can help. 4 weapons swung toward her instantly. She raised her hands, the crash axe left behind in the galley. Had to sell this. Had to make them believe. I speak Arabic, she lied smoothly, her voice quavering with manufactured fear. I can translate the pilots. They'll cooperate if they understand you're serious. I can make them understand. Please don't hurt him. Alpha's eyes narrowed, suspicious. You speak Arabic. My ex-husband was Lebanese. I learned. Please, I just want everyone to survive this. The other passengers stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Marcus looked horrified, but Alpha's grip on the elderly man loosened slightly. He was considering it. Good. Predictable. They needed someone to facilitate communication, to be their intermediary. It was basic hostage negotiation. Establish a go-between to create the illusion of cooperation while they made their real demands. What's your name? Alpha demanded. Sarah Martinez. You try anything, Sarah Martinez, and I paint these walls with your blood. Understand? Yes, I understand. He shoved the elderly man back into his seat and grabbed Sarah's arm instead, his grip bruising. Come, we talk to pilots together. Perfect. As he pulled her toward the cockpit, Sarah's eyes swept the cabin one final time. The hijacker in 17F watched the middle section. 23A covered the rear. 31C, the woman, stood near the emergency exit row. Sarah's tactical brain noted the woman's hand resting on something in her jacket pocket. Detonator? Probably. Dead man's switch, most likely. Release it and everyone dies. This was worse than she'd thought. Alpha pounded on the cockpit door again. Pilots, I have one of your crew, a woman named Sarah. I will count to 10, then I shoot her. Sarah pressed herself against the door, her voice urgent. Captain, it's Sarah Martinez. He's serious. He'll kill me. Then, softer, in a voice only the pilots might hear through the door, don't open. Repeat, do not open. 10, Alpha began counting down. 9, 8. Inside, Sarah could hear muffled voices. Argument, the captain and co-pilot debating. 7, 6. The plane lurched suddenly, turbulence, or had one of the pilots made an evasive maneuver, warning the hijackers they were still in control. Several passengers screamed. Alpha stumbled, catching himself against the bulkhead. 5, 4. Sarah's muscles coiled. The crash axe was 15 feet behind her in the galley. Could she reach it? No, too far, too many weapons tracking her. Think, improvise. 3, 2. The cockpit doors, lock mechanism clicked. No, they were opening it. The door swung inward 6 inches. Through the gap, Sarah saw the co-pilot's terrified face. Young, maybe 30, his hands shook. Then she saw the blood. Captain Jenkins, the senior pilot, slumped unconscious in his seat, a gash across his forehead streaming red. The co-pilot was alone, overwhelmed, panicking. Alpha kicked the door fully open and shoved Sarah inside. his gun immediately finding the co-pilot's head. "Fly where I tell you or die. Damascus. Set course for Damascus now." The co-pilot's hands flew to the controls, but they shook so badly he could barely grip the yoke. The plane's nose dipped slightly. He'd overcorrected. Warning lights began flashing across the instrument panel. Altitude indicator dropping. Airspeed increasing beyond safe parameters. Sarah's eyes scanned the instruments with the instinct of thousands of flight hours. They were in trouble. The co-pilot was losing it. "He can't fly under this pressure," Sarah said quietly. Alpha's gun swung toward her. "Silence. He's going to crash the plane. Look at the instruments. We're descending too fast. He's panicking." The altimeter confirmed her words. 34,000 feet. 33,500. 33,000. Dropping faster. "Then you fly," Alpha screamed. "Your flight crew make it work." Sarah met his eyes. This was it. The moment, truth or continued deception. "I'm not just flight crew," she said calmly. "I'm a pilot, former Air Force, fighter jets, 127 combat missions. I can fly this plane. I can save everyone aboard, but you need to let me sit down. Now." Alpha's face twisted with confusion, suspicion, rage. "You, a waitress." The plane shuddered. 32,000 feet. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Choose. Let me fly, or we all die in 3 minutes when he crashes us into the Pacific Ocean." Alpha's eyes darted between Sarah's unwavering stare and the chaotic instrument panel, where red warning lights flashed like an emergency room gone critical. The altimeter continued its relentless countdown. 31,500 feet. 31,000. The co-pilot hyperventilated, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled to stabilize the aircraft. "You're lying," Alpha hissed, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Trying to trick me." "Check my personnel file if we survive the next 2 minutes," Sarah shot back. "Captain Sarah Martinez, call sign Razor. Flew F-16s out of Nelly's Air Force Base. Did 3 tours in the Middle East. I know every system on this aircraft, and I know we're about to enter an unrecoverable dive unless someone who knows what they're doing takes those controls." The plane shuddered violently. Something in the overhead compartment broke loose, slamming against the cockpit ceiling. Through the open door, passengers' screams reached a fever pitch. Even the other hijackers looked terrified now. 30,000 feet. Alpha's calculation was written across his face. He couldn't fly the plane. His men couldn't fly it. The co-pilot was falling apart. If Sarah was lying, they were dead anyway. If she was telling the truth, she was his only chance at whatever twisted victory he'd planned. "Fine," he yanked the co-pilot from his seat, throwing him against the cockpit wall. "But I watch every move. One wrong action, anything suspicious, and I scatter your brains across this windscreen. Clear." "Crystal?" Sarah slid into the captain's seat, her hands already reaching for the controls before her body fully settled. The moment her fingers touched the yoke, 10 years of serving coffee and smiling pleasantly evaporated like morning fog. This was muscle memory carved deeper than bone. The seat was wrong, adjusted for Captain Jenkins' height. She hit the adjustment controls, bringing it forward up slightly. Her feet found the rudder pedals. Eyes scanned the primary flight display, navigation instruments, engine indicators. Boeing 777-300ER. She'd never flown this exact model, but she'd studied everything with wings during her service. The principles were the same. Airspeed 340 knots and climbing too fast. Altitude 29,200 feet too low. Descent rate 2,800 feet per minute, way too steep. Angle of attack approaching critical. "What are you doing?" Alpha pressed the gun barrel against her temple. "Why aren't you pulling up?" "Because if I pull up too hard right now, I'll stall the engines and we'll drop like a stone. Watch and learn." Her left hand moved to the throttle levers, reducing power smoothly. Right hand on the yoke, gentle back pressure, not a jerk, not a yank, a controlled gradual pull. The horizon line on the artificial display began to shift. The nose lifted incrementally. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "Come on." The descent rate decreased, 2,500 feet per minute, 2,200, 1,800. She adjusted the trim wheel, fine-tuning the aircraft's pitch. The controls felt mushy, the plane heavy. Captain Jenkins must have hit his head during initial turbulence or struggle. But it was responding. Years of fighter jet precision guided her touch. In an F-16, you were the aircraft. In a 777, you negotiated with it. 1,200 feet per minute, 800, 500. The warning klaxons silenced one by one. The altitude stabilized at 27,500 feet. Airspeed normalized to 280 knots. The plane leveled, the violent shaking smoothing into normal flight vibration. Sarah exhaled slowly. Behind her, the co-pilot had slumped to the floor, sobbing with relief. Through the open cockpit door, the cabin noise changed from panic to confused, fragile hope. "See," Sarah kept her voice steady, professional. "We're stable, now about Damascus. You'll fly there, no tricks, no deviations. I'll need to program the flight management system. New route, fuel calculations. We don't have enough fuel for Damascus from our current position. We'll need to land and refuel probably." "No," Alpha's gun hand shook. "No landing, Damascus direct." Sarah turned in her seat to face him fully, ignoring the weapon. "Listen to me very carefully. This aircraft burns approximately 8,000 pounds of fuel per hour. We left lax with enough fuel for Tokyo plus reserves. Damascus is the opposite direction. We'd need to backtrack over land, navigate through restricted airspace, and..." Movement outside the cockpit door caught her eye. Marcus had appeared, standing pale and shaken but functional. Smart man checking on the flight deck. Behind him she glimpsed 17F, the second hijacker, weapon trained on the passengers. "Everything okay up here?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Tell them we're stable," Sarah ordered. "Tell the passengers we've experienced severe turbulence, but everything is under control. Keep them calm." Alpha nodded sharply. "Do it, and close this door." Marcus disappeared. The door swung shut with a heavy click, sealing them in. Just Sarah, Alpha, and the unconscious captain. The co-pilot had crawled to the jump seat, hugging his knees, broken. Sarah's mind raced through scenarios. She was in the cockpit, tactical advantage gained. But Alpha's gun never wavered, and 3 more hijackers controlled 287 terrified civilians. The woman with the dead man's switch. Any wrong move and this plane became a fireball. She began programming the flight management computer, her fingers dancing across the keypad. Route inputs, waypoint selections. But her eyes tracked reflections in the dark instrument panels. Alpha's position, his grip on the weapon, his breathing pattern. Combat situational awareness. "How long to Damascus?" Alpha demanded. "Approximately 9 hours, assuming we don't get intercepted by military jets first. The moment air traffic control realizes we've deviated from our flight plan, they'll scramble fighters. They'll force us to land or shoot us down. Then fly low, below radar." Sarah almost laughed. "This isn't a crop duster. We can't fly a 777 at treetop level, and even if we could, the fuel consumption would." "I don't care about fuel. I care about completing our mission." "Our mission?" Sarah caught the phrase, filed it away. Not his mission. Our. Meaning this wasn't just about hijacking. There was an objective, a target. Damascus was just a waypoint. She pulled up the navigation display, showing the route. "If we continue toward Damascus, we'll cross back over Nevada in approximately 40 minutes. Military airspace. They'll scramble F-16s from Nelly's, my old base. Those pilots won't hesitate." Alpha's face twitched. Fear, recognition. "You will handle them, talk to them, tell them we have bombs, dead man switches. If they shoot us down, we fall on a city." "Bombs, confirmed. Sarah's heart rate kicked up, but her hands remained steady on the controls. And if I refuse? The gun pressed harder against her skull. Then I shoot you, drag that useless co-pilot back to this seat, and we die together. But we die over an American city. Many, many people die with us. Your choice, hero. Sarah's jaw clenched. Terrorist logic. Win or lose, maximize casualties. Make your death count. She'd seen it 100 times in briefings, in combat, in the aftermath of attacks. But she'd also stopped it, more times than she could count. Fine, she said quietly. I'll fly to Damascus, but I need something first. You need nothing but to obey. I need water, and I need to check on Captain Jenkins. He's bleeding badly. If he dies from a head wound, you'll have a murder charge that guarantees execution. Alpha considered this. The water fine, the captain. He glanced at Jenkins' slumped form. Check him, but I watch everything. Sarah unbuckled, moving carefully, telegraphing every motion. She found the first aid kit mounted on the bulkhead, pulled out gauze and antiseptic. Kneeling beside Jenkins, she checked his pulse, weak but steady. The gash on his forehead looked worse than it probably was. Head wounds bled dramatically. But while she cleaned the wound, her other hand slipped into Jenkins' flight jacket pocket. She knew what pilots carried. Always, emergency items. Her fingers found it, a small tactical flashlight. Aluminum, heavy, about 6 inches long. Improvised weapon. She palmed it, slipping it into her own uniform pocket as she bandaged Jenkins' head. Alpha watched, but from his angle, he couldn't see her hands clearly. He'll live, Sarah announced, returning to the captain's seat. Concussion probably, but alive. Good, now fly, no more delays. Sarah engaged the autopilot on the Damascus heading. The plane banked smoothly, turning back east, toward home, toward military airspace, toward whatever endgame these terrorists had planned. But she had the flashlight now, and she had the cockpit, and somewhere ahead her former squadron would be scrambling to intercept. The game had changed. Sarah "Razor" Martinez was back in the fight. The autopilot hummed softly as Flight 447 carved through thin air at 27,500 feet, its new trajectory pointing east toward Damascus. Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the instruments, but her mind operated on multiple levels simultaneously, a skill honed through years of combat flying where a single moment's distraction meant death. Level 1, fly the aircraft. Monitor fuel, altitude, airspeed, weather systems ahead. Level 2, assess the threat. Alpha stood 3 feet behind her, gun steady, eyes watching her every move. The unconscious captain, the broken co-pilot, 3 more hijackers in the cabin. Level 3, plan, escape routes, attack vectors, countermeasure, survival odds. Level 4, the bigger picture. What was their real target? How much fuel now? Alpha's voice cut through her concentration. Sarah tapped the fuel management display. 142,000 pounds, enough to reach Damascus with minimal reserves, assuming optimal conditions and no military intervention. There will be no intervention. You'll make sure of that. Through the cockpit windscreen, Sarah watched clouds drift past like white mountains. Somewhere below, America stretched vast and unknowing. In air traffic control centers across the country, controllers were already seeing their transponder code, the deviation from the filed flight plan. Protocols would be activated. NORAD would be notified. Fighter jets would be fueled and armed. Her former world was mobilizing, and she was on the wrong side of it. The radio crackled to life. Flight 447, this is Los Angeles Center. You have deviated from your assigned route. Please confirm navigation status and intentions. Alpha's gun pressed into Sarah's shoulder blade. Ignore it. If I ignore it, they'll assume the worst and send fighters immediately. Let me handle this. She reached for the radio transmit button. Los Angeles Center, Flight 447. We experienced a severe turbulence event. Captain is injured. We're returning to to Las Vegas for emergency landing, requesting priority handling. A pause. Sarah could almost hear the controllers conferring, checking, verifying. Flight 447 understood, but your current heading is not consistent with Las Vegas approach. Advise. Sarah's mind raced. They'd caught the discrepancy. Of course they had. Controllers weren't stupid. We're navigating around weather systems. We need to swing wide to avoid another turbulence area. Another pause, longer this time. Flight 447. Radar shows clear conditions along your route. Please confirm you are in control of the aircraft. The question behind the question, are you being hijacked? Alpha leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. Tell them everything is fine. Perfect. Or I signal 17F to shoot a passenger. You'll hear the gunshot over the cabin speakers. Sarah's finger hovered over the transmit button. Save the person about to die or alert ground control. Either choice condemned someone. She pressed the button. Los Angeles Center, affirmative. We are in full control. Captain's injury is making navigation challenging, but we're managing. Requesting you clear a direct path for our return. Flight 447, stand by. The radio went silent. Sarah knew what was happening. They were escalating. FBI, Homeland Security, Pentagon. The hijack code was already transmitted. Her words wouldn't change that. Good girl, Alpha said. See, cooperation keeps people alive. Sarah said nothing. Her eyes caught movement on the primary flight display, a new contact appearing on the traffic collision avoidance system. Then another, both approaching fast from the northeast. Military jets already. We have company, she said flatly. Alpha leaned forward, squinting at the display. What is that? Fighter aircraft, probably F-16s from Nelly's. They'll intercept us in approximately 4 minutes. Make them go away. I can't make them go away. They're following orders, but I can talk to them, maybe convince them we're not a threat. Alpha's face contorted with rage and fear. We are a threat, that's the point. We have explosives, we have, he caught himself biting off the words. Sarah filed it away. They had more than just the bombs. What else? Chemical weapons, biological, or was Damascus itself the weapon, crash the plane into a target, maximize casualties? The radio crackled again. Different voice, military frequency, clipped, professional. Unidentified aircraft on heading 95. This is Viper 11, United States Air Force. You are ordered to squawk 7700 and follow our instructions immediately. Acknowledge. Sarah's heart lurched. Viper 11. That was Major Rick Reaper Delgado. She'd flown with him, trained with him. Saved his life once over the Hindu Kush when his aircraft took a SAM hit. Alpha shoved the gun against her head. Get rid of them. Sarah keyed the radio. Viper 11, this is Flight 447. We have a situation aboard. Captain injured, returning for emergency landing. A pause, then. Flight 447, identify yourself. Pilot name and call sign. Reaper knew. He'd recognized something in her voice. Or maybe they'd already pulled the crew manifest and had seen her name. Either way, he knew. This is Sarah Martinez, first officer. Another pause, longer. She imagined Reaper in his cockpit, mind racing just like hers. Sarah Martinez, his old wingman, the pilot who'd vanished into civilian life, now suddenly on a hijacked plane. Martinez, confirm your status. Are you under duress? Blink your transponder twice for yes. Smart, he'd given her a way to signal without speaking. Alpha leaned over her shoulder, watching the radio. What did he say? What does that mean? He's asking me to confirm our emergency. Standard procedure. Her hand moved toward the transponder controls. Alpha grabbed her wrist, twisting brutally. No signals, no codes. You speak only the words I tell you. Pain shot up Sarah's arm, but she'd felt worse. Much worse. Then tell me what to say, because in about 90 seconds those fighters will be alongside us with weapons hot. If they think we're a terrorist threat, they will shoot us down. No hesitation. No negotiation. 287 people will die instantly. Tell them we have bombs, multiple devices, dead man switches. If they shoot us, if they force us down, we detonate over whatever city we're above. Denver, Kansas City, doesn't matter. Thousands will die. Sarah's blood ran cold. He meant it, every word. She keyed the radio. Viper 11, be advised. We have hostile actors aboard. They claim to have explosive devices with dead man switches. They're threatening detonation if intercepted or forced to land. Silence. Then two F-16s appeared on either side of the 777, close enough that Sarah could see the pilots' helmets through their canopies. Reaper on the left, another pilot. She didn't recognize him on the right. Both aircraft bristled with missiles, sidewinders, AMRAAMs, enough firepower to vaporize the 777 in seconds. Reaper's voice came back, all business now. Flight 447, we have visual confirmation of your aircraft. What are the hijackers' demands? Before Sarah could answer, the plane lurched violently. Not turbulence, someone had kicked the autopilot disconnect. She looked down. Alpha had hit the control yoke. What are you? Enough talking. I fly now, you've done your part. You can't fly this aircraft. I can fly enough to crash it, now move. He yanked her from the seat, throwing her against the cockpit wall. Her head struck metal. Stars exploded across her vision. The tactical flashlight fell from her pocket, clattering across the floor. Alpha dropped into the captain's seat, grabbing the yoke with both hands, the gun temporarily forgotten on the center console as he struggled with the controls. The plane banked sharply right. Warning alarms shrieked. The horizon tilted crazily through the windscreen. Sarah's training screamed at her, threat, weapon, opportunity. The gun 3 feet away, Alpha distracted. The co-pilot still huddled in the jump seat, useless. Captain Jenkins unconscious, the flashlight at her feet. Outside, the F-16s banked to follow, staying in formation. Reaper's voice over the radio. Flight 447, you are deviating erratically. Restore control immediately or we will engage. Alpha wrestled with the yoke, overcorrecting, sending the plane into a series of dangerous oscillations. He couldn't fly. He'd lied. Or maybe he'd had a few lessons, enough to be dangerous, not enough to be competent. The altimeter unwound, 27,000 feet, 26,500. Sarah calculated. If she went for the gun, he'd see her, fight her. The plane would crash during the struggle, but if she didn't act, he'd either crash anyway or regain minimal control and continue toward whatever horror they'd planned. Impossible choice, again. She grabbed the tactical flashlight, weighing it in her hand. Heavy, dense. Not a gun, but it would have to do. Alpha, she shouted, you're stalling the engines, let me help. He half-turned, eyes wild. Stay back. The plane shuddered. The left engine's warning light flashed, compressor stall from the violent maneuvers. Sarah took one step forward, the engine. I said stay back. His right hand released the yoke, reaching for the gun. Sarah moved. 10 years of coffee service, 10 years of smiling and serving. But 12 years before that of combat training, close quarters battle, survival tactics drilled into her until they became instinct. She was Razor, and Razor never missed. Sarah's body moved before conscious thought completed the command. The tactical flashlight became an extension of her arm as she lunged forward, closing the 3-foot gap in a fraction of a second. Alpha's hand was still reaching for the gun when the aluminum cylinder connected with his temple, a precise strike targeting the temporal bone. The impact made a sickening crack. Alpha's head snapped sideways. His hand spasmed, fingers brushing the gun but not grasping it. Blood trickled from the point of impact. But he didn't go down. Combat training kept him functional despite the blow. He roared with rage and pain, abandoning the gun to grab Sarah's wrist with both hands. His strength was shocking, fueled by adrenaline and fanaticism. He twisted her arm, and the flashlight clattered to the floor beside the forgotten pistol. The plane, now pilotless, began to roll left. The yoke, released, centered itself briefly before the aircraft's instability sent it into a banking turn. Warning klaxons shrieked. The ground proximity alarm began its mechanical chant. Terrain, terrain, pull up, pull up. You stupid woman. Alpha drove his forehead into Sarah's face. Cartilage crunched. Her nose exploded with pain and blood. She staggered backward, hitting the instrument panel. Lights and switches dug into her spine. Through watering eyes, she saw him lunge for the gun. No. She kicked upward, catching his reaching hand. The gun skittered across the cockpit floor, disappearing under the captain's seat. Alpha snarled and came at her instead, hands reaching for her throat. Outside the cockpit windows, the world rotated. Sky became ground became sky. The F-16s pulled away, unable to maintain formation with the wildly maneuvering airliner. Reaper's voice crackled with urgency. Flight 447, you are in an uncontrolled descent. Recover immediately. Martinez, if you can hear me, recover the aircraft. Sarah ducked Alpha's lunge, using his momentum against him. She grabbed his jacket and pulled while simultaneously dropping to one knee. Basic judo. Alpha flew over her, crashing into the forward instrument panel with enough force to crack a display screen. The co-pilot finally found his courage, or his survival instinct. He lunged from the jump seat toward the controls, trying to grab the yoke. Get us level, Sarah shouted at him while grappling with Alpha. Just get us level. But the young co-pilot's hands shook too badly. He grabbed the yoke and yanked back hard, too hard. The plane's nose pitched up violently. G-forces slammed everyone downward. Sarah's knees buckled. Alpha fell, his grip on her breaking. The stall warning blared, airspeed dropping critically, angle of attack approaching the point where the wings would lose lift entirely. Push forward, Sarah screamed. Push the yoke forward. The co-pilot's face had gone gray with terror, but he obeyed. The nose dropped. The G-forces reversed, throwing everyone toward the ceiling. Sarah's feet left the floor. Alpha floated beside her for a surreal moment, blood from his temple wound forming spherical droplets in the temporary zero-G. Then gravity reasserted itself with savage force. They crashed back down. Sarah landed on her side, ribs screaming in protest. Alpha landed on his feet, cat-like, and immediately kicked at her head. She rolled. His boot whistled past her ear and connected with the center console, cracking plastic. He kicked again. This time she caught his ankle, twisted, and heard something pop. Alpha howled, his leg buckling. The plane leveled briefly as the co-pilot fought the controls, then immediately began rolling right. The young pilot was overcorrecting every input, turning the aircraft into a Bronco. Through the chaos, Sarah heard new sounds from the cabin behind the closed cockpit door. Screams, crashes, overhead bins breaking open, passengers being thrown against seats and bulkheads. Some of those people were dying back there, crushed or broken by forces their bodies weren't designed to withstand. She had to end this, now. Alpha lunged at her again despite his injured leg, his face twisted with pain and determination. They collided in the narrow cockpit space. His hands found her throat, squeezed. Her vision began to tunnel, red creeping in from the edges. She drove her thumbs into pressure points below his jaw, a nerve strike learned in Air Force survival school. Alpha's grip loosened for just a second. Enough. Sarah headbutted him. Her already broken nose screamed in agony, but she ignored it. Alpha's nose broke too. She felt it give way. He staggered back, blood sheeting down his face. The gun, where was the gun? She dropped to the floor, searching frantically under the captain's seat. Her fingers found metal, Cold, familiar. She grabbed it, rolling onto her back just as Alpha recovered and dove at her. She fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed cockpit. The bullet took Alpha in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He crashed into the navigation console, clutching the wound, eyes wide with shock. "Down," Sarah commanded, getting to her feet, the gun trained on him. "On the floor now." Alpha slumped to his knees, blood soaking his shirt, but his eyes remained defiant. "You've accomplished nothing," he gasped. "The others will complete the mission. You can't stop what's coming." "We'll see about that." Sarah grabbed his collar and dragged him toward the jump seat, keeping the gun on him. "Sit, don't move." She turned to the controls. The co-pilot had both hands on the yoke, white-knuckled, tears streaming down his face as the aircraft bucked and weaved. "I've got it," Sarah said, her voice somehow calm despite her racing heart and bleeding face. "Let go, I've got it." "I can't, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh God, we're going to crash." "No, we're not, trust me, let go." His hands released the yoke like it had burned him. Sarah slid into the captain's seat, ignoring the blood, hers and Alpha's, that slicked every surface. Her hands found the controls. Home. The instrument panel looked like a Christmas tree of warning lights. Altitude, 18,000 feet and still descending. Airspeed, erratic, oscillating between dangerously slow and dangerously fast. Bank angle, 35 degrees right. Engine temperatures climbing into the red. Cabin pressure fluctuating. But the plane still responded. The controls still worked. Sarah took a breath, her first calm breath in what felt like hours but had probably been less than 3 minutes. Then she began the recovery. Right hand on the yoke, gentle left pressure rolling the wings level, not too fast. The airframe had been stressed enough. Left hand on the throttles, adjusting power symmetrically, bringing the engines back into normal operating range. Feet on the rudder pedals, coordinating the turn, preventing adverse yaw. The 777 was big, heavy, momentum-driven, but it was flying, and Sarah knew how to make things fly. The bank angle decreased, 30 degrees, 25-20. The descent rate slowed, 3,000 feet per minute, 2,500, 2,000. The nose came up, 5 degrees below horizon, 3 degrees, 1 degree. Level. The plane steadied. Warning alarms silenced one by one like a choir finishing a terrible song. Sarah adjusted the trim, fine-tuning the aircraft's attitude. Increased power slightly to stop the altitude loss. Checked engine parameters, all green miraculously. Altitude 16,200 feet, stable. Heading 127 degrees, completely wrong, but at least they were flying straight. She keyed the radio. Viper 11, Flight 447, I have regained control of the aircraft. Situation in cockpit is contained. One hostile neutralized. Request you maintain escort position. Silence, then Reaper's voice filled with something that might have been relief or disbelief or both. "Martinez. Sarah, is that really you?" "It's me, Reaper. Sorry about the scare. Things got a little sporty up here." "A little, Jesus Christ, Sarah. You nearly augured in. We were 30 seconds from engaging." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 30 seconds from being shot down by her former squadron, by her friends. "Copy that. I appreciate the restraint, but we're not out of this yet. I've got one hijacker down in the cockpit, 3 more in the cabin with passengers, at least 1 bomb with a dead man's switch, maybe more. I need you to contact FBI, Homeland Security, whoever handles this stuff now. And Reaper." "Yeah. It's good to hear your voice." A pause. "Yours too, Razor, yours too. Now let's get you on the ground." Sarah looked at the fuel gauge. The wild maneuvering had burned through thousands of pounds. The cabin, she could only imagine the carnage back there. Injured passengers, terrified crew, and 3 more hijackers who now knew their leader had failed. She'd won the cockpit. But the battle was far from over. Sarah wiped blood from her eyes with her sleeve, trying to clear her vision. Her broken nose throbbed with every heartbeat, but pain was just information. She could hurt later. Right now, she needed to think. Alpha sat slumped in the jump seat, his shoulder wound bleeding steadily but not arterially. He'd live for now. The co-pilot had found zip ties in the emergency equipment locker and secured Alpha's hands behind his back, his confidence slowly returning now that someone competent controlled the aircraft. Captain Jenkins groaned, consciousness creeping back. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and confused. What happened? "Stay still, Captain," Sarah said without turning. "You took a hit to the head. We've had a situation, but it's under control up here." Under control? Jenkins tried to sit up, saw the blood everywhere, saw Alpha restrained and bleeding. "My God." "I need you to stay calm and stay quiet, sir. I'm handling it." The radio crackled. "Flight 447, this is Viper 11. We've contacted ground command. FBI and Homeland Security are coordinating. They're advising you divert to Nelly's Air Force Base, closest secure location with full emergency response capability." Sarah checked the navigation display. Nelly's, her old home. The base where she'd learned to fly fighters, where she'd earned her call sign, where she'd left behind a career and a life when the nightmares got too heavy. "Copy, Viper 11. But I've still got 3 hostiles in the cabin. Unknown weapons, confirmed explosives. I can't just land this bird and hope for the best." "Understood. What's your plan?" "Good question. What was her plan?" She keyed the intercom to the cabin. "Marcus, this is Sarah. Can you hear me?" Silence, then crackling. "Sarah, oh thank God, we heard shots, we thought." "I'm fine, cockpit is secure. What's happening back there?" Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's bad. The 3 hijackers are still armed. After all that crazy flying, there are injuries, broken bones, head wounds. One woman in first class might be having a heart attack. The hijackers are keeping everyone in their seats, weapons out. The woman, 31C, she has something in her hand. Won't let go of it. Says if we try anything, she'll detonate." "Dead man switch, confirmed." "How many passengers are seriously injured?" "At least 15 need immediate medical attention. Maybe more. It's chaos back here, Sarah. People are crying, praying. Some are trying to be brave, but..." Sarah's jaw tightened. 15 injured, maybe dying, because she'd fought for the cockpit, because she'd made the plane maneuver like a fighter jet instead of a passenger liner. Necessary casualties, the military would say, acceptable losses for mission success. But she'd left that thinking behind. These weren't statistics, they were people. "Marcus, listen carefully. Keep everyone calm. Tell them help is coming. Don't provoke the hijackers. I'm working on a solution." She switched back to the radio. "Reaper, I need options. I've got injured passengers, 3 armed hostiles, and at least 1 suicide bomber with a trigger. I land at Nelly's, they'll blow the plane on the runway. I don't land, people die from their injuries. Stand by, Razor." While she waited, Sarah's mind raced through tactical scenarios. In an F-16, she'd have ejection seats. Fire the seat, escape, problem solved. But you couldn't eject 287 people from a 777. What if she depressurized the cabin, put everyone to sleep with hypoxia? No, the hijackers had probably briefed for that. They'd be on portable oxygen, and passengers would die before they passed out. Storm the cabin herself. 3 armed hostiles in a confined space with civilians as cover. Suicide mission. The plane shuddered slightly, turbulence or something else. Sarah scanned the instruments, everything normal, but something felt wrong. Then she saw it on the traffic collision avoidance system. New contacts, multiple, approaching fast from the east. "Viper 11, I've got multiple fast movers on my scope. Please advise." "Flight 447, those are additional fighters from Nelly's. We're establishing a combat air patrol around your position. If the hijackers try to deviate toward populated areas, we have authorization to engage. Shoot down the plane. Kill everyone aboard to prevent a worse catastrophe. Standard protocol. Sarah had participated in those very drills. She'd been one of the pilots who would pull the trigger. Now she was on the other side. "Copy that," she said quietly. 4 F-16s formed up around the 777, 2 on each wing, slightly behind and below. A flying cage, beautiful and terrible. Reaper's voice came back. "Razor, Ground Command has a proposal. They want you to descend to 10,000 feet over unpopulated desert. FBI hostage rescue team will infiltrate via halo jump, high altitude, low opening. They'll breach the cabin mid-flight, neutralize the threats." Sarah blinked. "You're joking." "Negative, they've done it before. Classified ops. It's risky, but—" "Risky? It's insane. The cabin pressure differential, the turbulence, the timing. One mistake and the hijackers detonate, or the HRT misses the aircraft entirely, or the breach depressurizes the cabin and kills everyone." "You have a better idea." She didn't, that was the problem. Alpha laughed from the jump seat, a wet pained sound. "You see, you cannot win. We planned for everything. Land, we detonate. Stay airborne, we detonate. Attack us, we detonate. We are already dead, already martyrs, but we will take hundreds with us." "Shut up," Sarah snapped. But he was right. They'd created a no-win scenario. Whatever choice she made, people died. Unless an idea formed, crazy, dangerous, maybe impossible. But she was Razor. She'd made a career out of impossible. "Reaper, negative on the HRT insertion. I have a different plan." "Talk to me." "What's the ceiling on those F-16s?" "We can operate up to 50,000 feet. Why?" Sarah's hands moved to the throttles, pushing them forward. The engines roared, and the 777 began to climb. "What are you doing?" the co-pilot asked, alarmed. "Something stupid." Sarah pulled up the aircraft performance data. Maximum certified altitude for the 777, 43,100 feet. Maximum safe cabin pressure differential, 9.4 psi. She was going to exceed both. "Flight 447, we show you climbing. Explain your intentions." "I'm going to take this bird to 45,000 feet, above the certified ceiling. The cabin pressure differential will max out. Then I'm going to execute a controlled rapid decompression." Silence on the radio. Then, "Sarah, that's insane." "Yeah, but listen. At 45,000 feet, rapid decompression will incapacitate everyone in the cabin within 15 seconds. Hypoxia. They'll pass out before they can detonate. I'll be on oxygen up here. The passengers' oxygen masks will deploy automatically, but they won't be enough at that altitude. They're only designed for temporary use at lower altitudes. Everyone goes to sleep, including your injured passengers. Sarah, this could kill them. They're dying anyway if we don't do something. At least this way, we control the outcome. Once everyone's unconscious, I dive back to 10,000 feet, repressurize, everyone wakes up. Then we land. HRT can secure the cabin while everyone's still groggy." The co-pilot stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "This violates every safety protocol. The structural stress on the airframe, the—" "I know what I'm doing," Sarah interrupted. "I've pushed aircraft past their limits before. This one can handle it." Alpha struggled against his restraints. "You'll kill everyone, you're bluffing." "Watch me." Sarah pulled the oxygen mask down over her face, securing it tight. Checked the flow. Good. She gestured for the co-pilot and Captain Jenkins to do the same. Altitude, 22,000 feet and climbing. The F-16s matched her ascent, surrounding her like guardian angels or executioners. She wasn't sure which. "Flight 447, Ground Command is not authorizing this action. Repeat, You are ordered to maintain current altitude and await further instructions. Sarah ignored the radio. Her hands were steady on the controls. The throttles pushed to maximum continuous thrust. The nose angled up at 15 degrees. 30,000 feet. In the cabin, passengers would be noticing the climb, the unusual angle, the increasing engine noise, wondering what was happening. The hijackers would be suspicious, weapons ready. 35,000 feet. The airframe groaned, temperatures dropped. Outside air temperature, minus 60 Celsius. The engine strained, burning fuel at an enormous rate. 40,000 feet. Sarah's hand moved to the outflow valves, the system that maintained cabin pressure, automated normally, but she'd switched to manual control. "Everyone hold on," she said quietly. "This is going to be unpleasant." 42,000 feet. 43,000 feet. The service ceiling alarm began screaming. The aircraft was operating outside safe parameters, but it was still flying, still climbing. 44,000 feet. Sarah's finger hovered over the outflow valve control. One button press and she'd vent the cabin to the thin atmosphere outside. Everyone without oxygen would have 15 seconds before unconsciousness, 30 before possible brain damage, 60 before possible death. It was a gamble, a terrible, necessary gamble. 45,000 feet. "God forgive me," Sarah whispered. She pressed the button. The outflow valves opened with a mechanical whir that Sarah felt more than heard. Immediately, the pressurized air inside the cabin began rushing out into the thin atmosphere at 45,000 feet. The pressure differential gauge plummeted. 8.5 psi, 7 psi, 5 psi. In the cabin behind the cockpit door, chaos erupted. The sudden pressure drop created a violent wind tunnel effect. Loose papers, napkins, plastic cups, anything not secured, became projectiles flying toward the outflow vents. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments with a chorus of mechanical clicks. Passengers who'd been dozing jerked awake. Those already terrified screamed louder. Through the cockpit door, Sarah heard the pandemonium, Bobby's wailing, adults shouting, the hijackers yelling commands that were lost in the noise. "What's happening?" Marcus's voice came over the intercom, high-pitched with panic. "Sarah, what did you do?" Sarah's own oxygen mask muffled her reply. "Emergency decompression. Get on oxygen. Now, tell everyone to put their masks on. You have 10 seconds." But 10 seconds wasn't enough for 287 people. It never was. The pressure kept dropping. 3 psi, 2 psi, approaching ambient external pressure, essentially zero at this altitude. Sarah counted in her head, watching the clock. At 45,000 feet, the partial pressure of oxygen was so low that even breathing pure oxygen through a mask barely provided enough for consciousness. The passengers' simple drop-down masks, designed only to deliver a mix of cabin air and oxygen during emergencies at normal altitudes, were almost useless up here. 5 seconds. In the cabin, 17F, the second hijacker, would be experiencing the first symptoms: euphoria, confusion, the insidious creeping of hypoxia that made you think everything was fine even as your brain starved for oxygen. 10 seconds. His vision would tunnel, his weapon would suddenly feel heavy, his thoughts would become sluggish. 15 seconds. Sarah heard a thud through the door, something or someone hitting the floor. 20 seconds. More thuds, bodies collapsing, the screaming had stopped, the crying had stopped. An eerie, terrible silence replaced it. Sarah's hands remained rock-steady on the controls despite her racing heart. She monitored the pressure gauge, the altitude, the aircraft systems. Everything had to be precise. Too long at this altitude and people would die. Not long enough and the hijackers might remain conscious. 30 seconds. Time. Sarah pushed the yoke forward. The nose dropped. The altimeter began unwinding like a stopwatch. 44,000 feet. 43,000. The dive had to be controlled, too steep and she'd build excessive airspeed, potentially overstressing the airframe. Too shallow and they'd descend too slowly, leaving everyone oxygen-starved. She'd calculated a descent rate of 6,000 feet per minute. Aggressive for an airliner, but manageable. Her hands moved to the outflow valves, beginning to close them gradually. Can't repressurize too fast or eardrums would rupture. Had to be a careful balance, get pressure back while descending to where the pressure differential could be maintained. 40,000 feet. Through her oxygen mask, Sarah's breathing came steady and controlled. Years of high-altitude flight training. She'd practiced emergency decompression dozens of times in simulators, a few times for real when combat damage breached her F-16's canopy. But never with hundreds of lives, depending on her timing. 35,000 feet. Viper 11, Flight 447, beginning repressurization now. Reaper's voice was tight. Copy 447. Medical teams are standing by at Nellie's. Ground command is, well, they're not happy but you're still flying. 30,000 feet. The outflow valves moved incrementally, allowing cabin pressure to rebuild. Sarah watched the gauge like a hawk. 1 psi, 2 psi, 3 psi. The cabin altitude, the effective altitude passengers experienced inside, began dropping. 25,000 feet. Sarah keyed the intercom. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Static, then a weak, groggy voice. "Sarah, what? Everyone's." "I know, check for breathing. Everyone should start coming around as we descend. Focus on the injured first. The hijackers, are they unconscious?" I can't. Give me a second." Sarah counted heartbeats while maintaining the descent. Outside, the F-16s matched her rate, their pilots surely wondering if she just committed mass murder or pulled off a miracle. 20,000 feet. "Sarah," Marcus's voice came back stronger. "The hijackers are down, all three. 17F is unconscious, 23A is out, and the woman 31C, she's, oh God, her hand. The dead man's switch." Sarah's blood froze. What about it? "She's still holding it. Still unconscious, but her hand is locked around it. If she drops it when she wakes up." "Don't let her drop it." Sarah's command was sharp as a blade. "Marcus, listen to me very carefully. You need to secure that device before she regains consciousness. Can you do that?" I don't know how to." "Tape, medical tape, duct tape, anything. Tape her hand closed around the switch. Make sure her fingers can't release. Do it now before she wakes up." 15,000 feet. Cabin pressure, 5 psi and rising. Oxygen levels returning to normal. Throughout the cabin, passengers would be stirring, confused, disoriented. Some would remember the terror before they passed out. Others would have merciful gaps in their memory. Sarah heard sounds through the door, coughing, moaning, a child crying sweet music because it meant they were alive. "I've got the tape," Marcus reported. "Wrapping her hand now there, it's secure, the switch can't release." "Good, now zip tie her hands together, device and all. Same with the other 2 hijackers. Use everything you have. Belts, shoelaces, electrical cords from the entertainment systems. I want them completely immobilized." "On it." 10,000 feet. Sarah leveled the aircraft, reducing the descent rate. The worst was over, probably, maybe. She scanned the cabin status panel. Pressure, normal. Oxygen, normal. Temperature, normal. But the emergency equipment indicators showed deployment across all zones. Oxygen masks dangling. First aid kits opened. The cabin would look like a war zone. And then there were the injuries. The ones from the violent maneuvering. The ones from the decompression. Possibly the ones from cardiac events triggered by the stress and hypoxia. "Marcus, casualty report." A long pause. Sarah heard voices in the background, Marcus conferring with the other flight attendants. "We have. It's hard to say exactly. At least 20 people need medical attention. The woman in first class with the possible heart attack. She's breathing but unresponsive. Several broken bones from the earlier maneuvering. Some head injuries. Multiple people with severe nosebleeds from the pressure change. One elderly man isn't waking up." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Not all of them would make it. The plan had worked. The hijackers were neutralized, but the cost was written in blood and broken bodies. "Okay, do what you can. We'll be on the ground in 15 minutes. She switched to the radio. "Nellie's Tower, Flight 447. I am 15 miles southwest, descending to pattern altitude. Requesting emergency landing, full equipment response. I have multiple casualties aboard, 3 suspects in custody, and at least 1 live explosive device." "Flight 447, Nellie's Tower. You are cleared direct, any runway. Emergency crews are positioned. Bomb disposal is standing by. FBI and paramedics ready to board immediately upon full stop." Sarah checked her fuel, enough for one approach, no second chances. The desert landscape appeared through the windscreen, familiar red rock and scrub brush. Nellie's Air Force Base stretched across the valley floor, runways like gray ribbons on the tan earth. Home. The F-16 escort peeled away, giving her room to maneuver. Through her side window, she saw Reaper render a salute as he banked off. She returned it briefly, then focused on the approach. Landing checklist. Gear down, flaps configured, airspeed managed, approach angle stabilized. The runway grew larger. Emergency vehicles lined both sides. Fire trucks, ambulances, tactical response units. News helicopters circled at a distance. Sarah's hands moved with unconscious precision. Small corrections, tiny adjustments. The plane sank toward the concrete. The main gear touched with barely a chirp. Sarah deployed the spoilers, engaged reverse thrust. The nose gear settled gently. They were down. 287 souls, delivered to Earth. Most of them alive. Sarah brought the aircraft to a complete stop on the runway. Around them, emergency vehicles converged. FBI tactical teams in black gear swarmed the aircraft. Paramedics rushed forward with stretchers. She shut down the engines. The sudden silence was profound. Behind her, Alpha stirred in the jump seat, consciousness returning. He looked at Sarah with hatred and something else, recognition of defeat. "It's over," Sarah said quietly. "Nothing is over," Alpha rasped. "This was just the beginning." But Sarah wasn't listening. She was staring out the windscreen at the armed agents surrounding the plane, at the paramedics preparing to rush aboard, at the smoke from her burned-out engines drifting across the desert wind. She'd done it. Against every odd, against every protocol, against every voice saying it was impossible. She'd saved them. The FBI tactical team breached the aircraft doors within 90 seconds of Sarah shutting down the engines. Black-clad agents flooded through forward and aft entries simultaneously, weapons raised, shouting commands. Passengers, those conscious enough to understand, raised their hands instinctively, adding to the confusion. But the threat was already neutralized. Sarah remained in the captain's seat, hands visible on the yoke as agents stormed the cockpit. They swept in with practiced efficiency, weapons tracking every corner until they confirmed the scene. One injured captain, one traumatized co-pilot, one bleeding hijacker restrained in the jump seat, and Sarah, still wearing her oxygen mask, blood from her broken nose staining her uniform. "Hands, let me see your hands," the lead agent commanded. Sarah raised them slowly. Captain Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force, retired. The cockpit is secure. One hostile neutralized here. 3 more in the cabin, unconscious and restrained. One has a dead man's switch taped to her hand. Exercise extreme caution. The agent's eyes narrowed behind his tactical goggles, processing. He spoke into his radio, relaying information. Other agents moved past, securing Alpha with professional zip ties that replaced the makeshift restraints, checking Captain Jenkins, guiding the shell-shocked co-pilot out of the cockpit. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us, now." Sarah unbuckled, her body protesting every movement. Adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a landscape of pain. Broken nose, bruised ribs, wrenched shoulder, cuts and contusions she hadn't noticed acquiring, but she walked out of the cockpit under her own power, head high. The cabin stopped her in her tracks. It looked like a hurricane had torn through. Oxygen masks dangled like dying flowers. Overhead bins hung open, contents scattered across seats and aisles. Blood streaked the walls and floor, some from the hijackers, some from injured passengers. Paramedics were already aboard, triaging victims with the calm efficiency of professionals who'd seen worse. Marcus caught her eye from where he knelt beside an elderly woman receiving oxygen. His face was haggard, but his eyes showed fierce admiration. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Sarah nodded once, then FBI agents escorted her down the emergency slide deployed at the forward door. Her feet hit the tarmac and nearly buckled. Strong hands caught her. "Easy there, Razor." She looked up into Reaper's face. Major Rick Delgado had landed and rushed over still in his flight suit, helmet tucked under one arm. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, and his eyes showed the strain of watching his former wingman nearly die a dozen different ways. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," he said, but his voice shook. "Learned from the best." Sarah tried to smile, but her broken nose made it agony. "Ma'am, we need to debrief you immediately." The FBI agent's tone was firm but not unkind. "There are protocols." "She needs medical attention first," Reaper interrupted. "Look at her." "Sir, this is a federal investigation." "And she just saved 287 lives while stopping a terrorist attack. Medical first." The standoff lasted 3 seconds before the agent relented with a curt nod. Paramedics approached with a gurney. Sarah waved it off. "I can walk." "Ma'am, you're bleeding heavily from the nose, showing signs of concussion, and—" "I said I can walk." They compromised. She walked to the ambulance with a paramedic supporting each arm. Behind her, the 777 sat like a beached whale, surrounded by emergency vehicles. Agents carried stretchers down the emergency slides. The first to emerge were the injured passengers. Then came the hijackers, unconscious and secured, including the woman with the device still taped to her clenched fist. Bomb disposal experts in heavy suits moved in carefully, their robot approaching the aircraft like a cautious animal. Sarah sat in the ambulance while a paramedic cleaned her face and examined her nose. "Definitely broken. You need X-rays, possibly surgery." "Later." "Ma'am." "I said later." An unmarked black SUV pulled up. A woman in a dark suit emerged, late 40s, gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "FBI," Sarah guessed. "Senior level." "Captain Martinez. I'm Special Agent Victoria Chen, FBI Counterterrorism Division. We need to talk." "I'm listening." Agent Chen glanced at the paramedic, privately. They moved to the shade of a nearby hangar. Sarah leaned against the corrugated metal wall, her legs finally admitting they couldn't hold her much longer. Chen studied her with the intensity of someone assembling a puzzle. "You're not listed on the flight crew manifest as a pilot. You're listed as a flight attendant. Why?" "Because that's what I was. I left the Air Force 10 years ago. I wanted a quiet life." "Quiet?" Chen's eyebrow arched. "You just executed an unauthorized high-altitude decompression maneuver that violated every FAA regulation, overstressed a commercial airframe past its certified ceiling, and conducted what amounts to aerial combat in civilian airspace. I saved 287 people. You risked killing all of them. The hijackers were going to kill them anyway. At least my way gave them a chance. Chen was silent for a moment, then sighed. The preliminary count is 15 injured seriously enough for hospitalization. 2 critical, the elderly heart attack victim and a young mother with a severe head injury. But 0 fatalities among passengers and crew. All 4 hijackers survived and are in custody. Sarah's chest tightened. The 2 critical, will they make it? Unknown. But the doctor said if you'd been airborne another hour without medical intervention, both would definitely be dead. Several others too. The weight of it settled on Sarah's shoulders. She'd saved most of them, but not all. Maybe 2 more would die because of her choices. We found documentation on the hijackers, Chen continued. Communications, plans. This wasn't just about taking a plane. They intended to crash it into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. during a major event tonight. Thousands would have died. Sarah's blood ran cold. Damascus was a diversion. Exactly. They planned to agree to land for refueling, then overpower the cockpit again during approach and redirect to D.C. You disrupted that plan at every stage. A commotion near the aircraft drew their attention. News helicopters had moved closer, cameras visible even at this distance. Reporters gathered at the security perimeter, shouting questions. This is going to be a media firestorm, Chen said. Your name, your face, your military record, all public within hours. That quiet life you wanted, it's gone. Sarah looked at the 777, at the passengers still being evacuated, at the tactical teams and paramedics and bomb disposal experts doing their jobs. She thought about Marcus's grateful eyes, about the children crying because they were alive to cry, about the grandchildren who would grow up knowing their grandfather instead of mourning him. Yeah, she said quietly, I know. There will be investigations, hearings. The FAA alone will have questions for months. Your actions were heroic, but they were also wildly illegal. I understand. Chen studied her again, then extended her hand. For what it's worth, Captain Martinez, welcome back. The world needs more people willing to make the hard choices. Sarah shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of the grip, the respect in the agent's eyes. Reaper appeared again, this time with her squadron commander, now a full colonel. Others followed, pilots she'd flown with, mechanics who'd serviced her aircraft, people from a life she'd thought she'd left behind. They surrounded her, not speaking, just present, a silent honor guard. In the distance, the last passengers descended from the aircraft. Families reunited on the tarmac. Children hugged parents. Strangers embraced, bonded by survival. Sarah Martinez had served coffee for 10 years, smiled at passengers, lived quietly, invisibly, safely. But today she'd flown. And 287 people were alive, because Razor had returned. The end.
Bravissimo. Adesso. Allora, ho capito che cosa devo fare. Vediamo se riesco già a farlo. Tu vai là. E tu qua. Devo riuscire a caderci sopra, in teoria. Ci arriverò? Ci arriverò. Posso salvare? Posso fermarmi qui? Così almeno in caso mi ricarica proprio già a questo punto. Proviamo. Camminerò, camminerò sulla tua strada, signore.
You two are gonna love this big surprise.
Dammi la mano, voglio restare. Non riesco a salire, Dio cane. Non mi fa salire, non posso. No! No! Ok. Vedi, le speedrun di Portal sono incredibili. Immagino. Però con le speedrun